On March 5th, 2017, Reverend John Sankey used a makeshift bamboo raft to cross a narrow stretch of water dividing southern China and neighboring Myanmar. He was taking Bibles and other supplies to China from Myanmar. It was his 11th mission crossing the river, bringing food and other humanitarian supplies to that country since 2014. But on this March day, waiting on the shores were Chinese security agents. He was arrested, and last month, China sentenced him to 7 years in prison. Chow is a U.S. legal permanent resident and has been doing missionary work in Asia for years. Joining me to talk about the plight of this Chinese missionary is his son, Ben Chow. Ben, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. How is your dad doing?
Thank you for having me, George. From what we've heard from his lawyer, he's doing well, and he's been exercising and eating well in his detention center, but we haven't been able to have any direct contact with him. So all of his conversations have been through his lawyer, which have been monitored by the authorities.
When was the last time you saw him or spoke to him?
The last time I saw him was December of 2016, and the last time I spoke to him was January of 2017, 2 months before he was arrested.
What was your father charged with, Ben?
My father was originally charged with illegal border crossing, and then his charge was escalated to organizing illegal border crossing.
You and your brother Amos have decided to go public with your father's plight. Why now?
We had waited until now to see what the decision and the verdict of his trial would be. So it took almost a full year for the Chinese authorities to hold a trial for my father. And with the sentence being 7 years in prison, we felt that this was more than we expected and more than is just. So we wanted to speak out now and, bring attention to my father's work, and more importantly, to the state of religious freedom in Asia and in China.
How are you guys handling as a family, knowing that your father has now been sentenced to 7 years in prison? How are you guys handling that?
The verdict of 7 years was very difficult to handle, and it's been a very challenging time for me and my family, but we're remaining hopeful and trying to do everything we can to influence the decision of the Chinese government, and also to persuade the United States government to be involved at the highest level through the White House and through our ambassador, Terry Branstad.
Your father, as I mentioned earlier, is a U.S. legal permanent resident. He married your mother, who is a native of North Carolina. Both you and your brother were born here in the United States. You are American citizens. Your father, as I said, he is a permanent resident, but he carries a Chinese passport. What is the U.S. government doing to secure your father's release?
The U.S. State Department has asked me not to comment on their involvement, and they are more than willing to make a statement on my family's behalf and on their own behalf of their involvement. We've had support from our local North Carolina senators, Richard Burr and Tom Tillis, as well as other prominent senators like Mr. Marco Rubio and Chris Smith. So we're very grateful and thankful for their support and their action. They've signed letters to the president and contacted the former Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, when he was still in office, to see if there's any action that could be taken from the United States government side to help and to aid my father's situation.
I know that the U.S. State Department says it is deeply concerned about your father's situation and are pressing the Chinese government to release your father on, quote, humanitarian grounds. What would you like the Chinese government to do in this situation, Ben?
We're hoping that the Chinese government will show mercy and provide my father unconditional release immediately. So we understand that the trial resulted in a 7-year sentence that my father's appealing, and we hope that through the appeal process and through some persuasion from the United States government, that the Chinese government will release him unconditionally after the appeal process has concluded.
Ben, how can we pray for your dad?
Please pray for his health and his safety, as well as please pray for the Chinese government officials and the Chinese authorities to have clarity in their judgment and have compassion and mercy in their hearts.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much, Ben, for coming on the show, and we will indeed continue to pray for your dad and for your family. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.